Hey everybody, and welcome to the world of weather. I am so glad that you are joining me today. We've been talking about hurricanes all week. And we've talked about how I love hurricanes. I love forecasting hurricanes. And there's a lot that goes into it. We've talked about storm surge. We've talked about hurricanes in Georgia. And we've talked about hurricanes in general. Want to give you a quick recap of the basics in case you missed our other lessons, and then we're going to talk about last year, and we're going to talk about this year, and what kind of things we look at as meteorologists to forecast what we're going to see this year. First of all, last year, 2019, you may remember the season started before the hurricane season officially began, and we talked about this earlier in the week. Hurricane season starts June 1st, and it continues through November 30th. Now, who can remember why hurricane season here in the Atlantic is June 1st through November 30th? Can anyone remember why? It's because of the warm ocean temperatures. The ocean temperatures have to be at least about 79 degrees in the top 50 meters of the ocean in order to get hurricanes or tropical cyclones, tropical storms to develop. So without the warm water, you don't see the tropical systems forming. Another thing you need, a disturbance. So you need an area of low pressure, and you need weak winds. So if you have strong winds moving over the ocean, you don't get a lot of development. If the ocean water temperature is cooler, you don't get a lot of development. So those are things we look at. And we talked about where they form. In June and July, they form in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Caribbean Sea, because that's where water temperatures are 79 or above. Then as we head into August, September, that's when they start to form in the Atlantic. And a lot of times we'll watch these as a tropical wave off the coast of Africa, and we'll follow them as they move across the Atlantic. And that's why the ocean temperature, once it gets up to 79 degrees, we start to see development. Now, last year, we had Andrea, and Andrea formed 11 days before June 1st. So it started before the tropical system began. And we've talked about that. That's not unusual. In fact, the past 5 years, we've had a tropical system develop before hurricane season even started. So the past 5 years, we have had these tropical systems start in May. So could it happen this year? Absolutely. And we see it. It's not unusual. It's just odds are it's going to start June 1st. That's because that's when the water temperature is at that temperature. Until it gets to that temperature, really hard to get these tropical systems to develop. Now, something of note is Andrea fell apart a day after it was named. So Andrea formed, but then it kind of fizzled. And again, it's because it has to maintain its strength. And it's just really hard in May for these systems to not only develop, but maintain their strength and actually make landfall. They really weaken pretty quickly. And that's what we saw last year. Last year, the prediction from the National Weather Service was 9 to 15 named storms. It was 4 to 8 hurricanes and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. The National Weather Service was actually predicting an average year as far as tropical systems, but we actually had an average number of major hurricanes and hurricanes, but we did have an above average number of named storms. So that is it. It's just a prediction every year. We'll come out with these predictions. It's very hard to know exactly how many you're going to see, but we'll be watching for this year's prediction and what the National Hurricane Center is going to predict for 2020. Now, we talk about El Nino and El Nino. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Just want to let you know, last year, starting in July, we were not under El Nino or La Nina. So we were in a what we call a neutral pattern. So we were not under the influence of either. In 2020, again, we're going to be expected to be in a neutral pattern. So we're not expected to be in the influence of El Nino or La Nina. So this year's pattern, very similar to what we saw last year. So keep that in mind. And we talk about it with El Nino for the Atlantic, which is what we're looking at, the Atlantic hurricane season. We actually see less hurricanes, and that's because we see more shear. We see stronger winds over the ocean. And again, we need light winds for these tropical systems to develop. So El Nino, less hurricane activity for the Atlantic, but it does increase ocean temperatures in the eastern Pacific. And then during La Nina, we get more hurricanes develop. So we're going to be in that neutral pattern, but that's what we were in last year. And even last year, we had a lot of tropical systems that developed. So we're going to talk about some of those. We're going to talk about what maybe could happen this year. Again, even when these predictions come out, you'll notice they're not always exactly right. It's really hard to forecast exactly how many you're going to get. And then another thing that I always stress, we could have 20 hurricanes in a year. We could have a very active season, but if none of them make landfall, we don't get the impacts. And we've had that. We've had years where we've had a well above active season, and everyone comes up to me and they're like, wow, what a great season. We didn't see anything. And it's no, it was there. They just didn't make landfall. On the other hand, we've had some seasons with a very low number of storms, very low number of hurricanes that actually developed, but they all made landfall or they all impacted the U.S. So, again, the more hurricanes you have, the higher the chance you have of them making landfall. It's like if you have 10 marbles and you throw 10 marbles at someone, or if you have 3 marbles and you throw 3 marbles at someone, chances are the person who has 10 marbles is going to hit that person more often. So the more you see develop, the more likely you are to be affected. But again, we've had seasons where even with a bunch of hurricanes, they didn't impact the U.S. And again, we've had a season where we've only had 3, 4 hurricanes and they all impacted the U.S. So the numbers, you need to take them for what they're worth, but also you need to realize all it takes is one, making landfall over your area to create devastation. So let's flip this around for today's World of Weather lesson for today. And we are talking about the 2019 hurricane season. So here we go. 2019, this is what we had. The white column, the white letters, that is what we normally see. And then on the right, that is what we had in 2019. So as you can see, we had an above average year. Normally we get about 12 named storms. We had 18. We had a lot of storms last year, 18 named storms. And we talked about names earlier in the week, how there's a list of names. Every 6 years, we recycle the list unless it's a very powerful hurricane. The name is retired. And it's very rare to go beyond that list of names. There's 21 names on the list. All the letters on there except Q, U, X, Y, and Z. Once we get past the 26 letters, once we get, the 21 letters, because again, those letters are removed, we start with the Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. But again, that's very rare. And even last year with 18, we certainly didn't get through 21 named storms, but we got through most of the list. Last year, 6 hurricanes is average. We had 6 major hurricanes, anything with a category 3 or above. 3 is what's average, and we had 3. So as far as hurricanes and major hurricanes, right where we should be, but we did have a high number of named storms. One of the storms we had last year, we talked about Andrea, that formed before the season even started, but it fizzled. Then we got to Dorian. Dorian was incredibly powerful. Dorian was a category 5 hurricane. The stronger the hurricane, the more well-defined the eye wall becomes. The stronger the hurricane, the more perfect it looks on the radar. You see that perfectly round eye. It's very symmetrical. Whenever you see that eye becomes asymmetrical or it starts to skirt a little bit, you know the hurricane is weakening. So when you have that really well-defined eye, you know it's a very strong, potent hurricane, possibly even gaining strength. And this is what it looks like from the hurricane hunters. They go inside the storms, and we talked about this earlier this week as well. They go inside the eye and they use instruments to measure these hurricanes, because otherwise you can't do it out from the middle of the ocean. We do have buoys in the ocean, but certainly they fly above it and get much better data to give us exactly what we need to know as far as the strength of the hurricane. But we had a stadium effect. You can see what the clouds looked like inside that perfectly defined storm eye. It was a category 5. There it is off the coast of Florida. And again, notice that really beautiful eye, perfectly defined. It was a monster. Dorian had 185-mile-an-hour winds. It is the strongest hurricane to ever hit the Bahamas. And those, the Bahamas, because this is of several islands, all the areas that got hit by Dorian certainly felt the effects. Massive devastation with Dorian as it moved across the Bahamas. Good news for us, though, it did not make landfall. It just grazed past the coast of Florida and Georgia. It caused beach erosion. We had very high waves and rip currents. We had damage along the coast as far as the waves go, and again, the beach erosion. But it did not make landfall, but it was dangerously close. Dorian was a very scary hurricane for us because it did stay off the coast, but look how closely it was to Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. All it would have taken was 30 miles, 40 miles for utter devastation along the Florida and South Carolina and Georgia coast. So we really got lucky with Dorian. And that's an example of you can have a very strong hurricane, and if it doesn't make landfall, it's not going to affect us. So again, we're looking at not only the strength of the hurricane, but where it's going. Both are equally important. We also had Lorenzo last year, also a very beautiful hurricane. Again, once you get to category 3 status and above, you have that really well-defined eye. This one stayed out to sea for the most part. This one was later in the season, and then it took a turn. It actually became extratropical, and we call these systems extratropical once they lose the tropical characteristics. And it hit the British Isles, which is insane. So it developed off the coast of Africa. This is the coast of Africa. Went by the Lesser Antilles and moved, and then it turned towards the British Isles. And again, that's not something we see very often either. So it was a very bizarre season as far as hurricane systems go. But we had quite a bit of storms, and we did have some major storms. So hopefully you were paying attention to some of the numbers. How many major hurricanes did we have last year? 16, 3, 1, or 5? And the answer is 3 major hurricanes last year. That was an average season. The number of major hurricanes was an average season, and hurricanes was an average season. We were above average when it came to the number of actual named storms. And again, I use this analogy, marbles. If you think of hurricanes or tropical system as marbles, let's say if you have 20 named storms and you have 20 marbles, and you're throwing these marbles, you have a higher percentage of them impacting the U.S. So the more storms you have, the higher the percentage of impacting the U.S. But again, that's not always true. You can have a high season without making landfall. We talked about El Nino and La Nina. Last year from July on, we were in a neutral pattern. So we were not El Nino or La Nina. And we use those to help us forecast hurricanes and the amount of hurricanes. Because again, we're forecasting something that hasn't happened yet. So it's almost impossible to know exactly how many hurricanes we'll have. But we were in a neutral pattern last year. And again, in 2020, we're in a neutral pattern. So I don't think we're going to see unusually low number of hurricanes, but I don't think we're going to see an unusually high number of hurricanes. And I think just judging on history, last year we had a storm form before the season started. And that's been the past 5 years. So just on history alone, I would predict that we are going to have a hurricane, or a tropical system, I should say, develop in May ahead of season. Again, season starts June 1st, so I think that's possible. And as far as named storms, I am expecting a very similar year to last year. So we could see some massive category 3 and above monster hurricanes, and we could see an overactive season. So it's possible. Last year, the National Hurricane Center predicted an average season, and we did have an above average season. So again, with these predictions, you take it for what they're worth. We're forecasting something that hasn't happened yet, but we do look at things like ocean temperature and temperatures and, the strength of the winds across the Atlantic to help forecast these systems. So I'm going to look on Facebook. I hope a lot of you are enjoying this lesson. Oh, you know what, Gerald? You want a lesson on fog? That's actually in the works. I think we're doing that next week. If it's not next week, it's the week after. But we are doing a lesson of fog. And I love these suggestions because it's hard for me to come up with all these ideas. I want to make it interesting. So if you have suggestions of what you want to learn about, please write below. I'd love your suggestions. That's super helpful. But Gerald, we do have a lesson coming on fog. Thank you for the suggestion. Hi, Anne-Marie. Hi from Livonia. How are you? Hi, Patricia. Hi, Vader. Oh, Bob, I'm so glad you love these sessions. I love that adults are watching these too, because I find them super fascinating, but I'm a weather nerd. But I think this is stuff everybody should know, not just kids. This is really good for us to keep building our brain. I think it's important to always be reading and learning, especially we're stuck at home. So this is the perfect time to be learning about weather. And especially when hurricane season comes this year, you're going to know so much more, and you'll be able to speak about what's happening and understand when we're giving these forecasts. It makes all the difference. Ralph. Hi, Ralph. Oh, Melissa, she says she watched me in the middle of the night. It was amazing. Thank you, Melissa. Unfortunately, you may be watching me in the middle of the night again this Sunday. We have more severe storms. I did do a Facebook Live. It was, I want to say around 10:30. And I'm going to do another one here shortly on the latest on Sunday severe weather. So I'm glad you watched, Melissa. Please stay up to date with the latest. We have more storms this weekend. Let's see. Do they have a lot of hurricanes in the Indian Ocean? And we've talked about this in other lessons as well, how we have three hurricanes don't form all over the globe. So we have lots of oceans all over the globe. They don't form everywhere. There's areas where they are more likely to form, and it's those areas that have the warmer ocean temperature and those light winds. So they're not everywhere, but we do have cyclones and typhoons. And there's certain places on the globe where those are more likely to form than others. And I do have that in a different lesson. I think that's in the first lesson we did on hurricanes, which was on Tuesday. So go back and watch that. Hi, Butch. Thank you. I love that you're watching every day. So I think that's all the questions. You guys are such good listeners. I love that you guys are fascinated and interested in these hurricanes like I am. Tomorrow's Saturday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Are you all in the same boat with me? I always know. Any other time you ask me what day of the week it is, and of course I know, and it's just my mind. I feel like all us mom and dads have so much in our minds right now to process between work, the kids, school, being home from school. It's a lot. So Monday's lesson, and it's actually was supposed to be Friday. We had to move things back because of the severe weather. Tomorrow we're going in depth with hurricanes. So we are talking about the quadrants, something we haven't done yet. So much. Thanks. Oh, hi, Hasina. We're learning about the different quadrants of the hurricanes, and we're really going to go in depth and learn about the nitty gritty when it comes to hurricanes. So that's on Monday. And then that's a great time. We can refresh things we've talked about that maybe you didn't quite understand or you want to learn more about. So write down those questions, keep them coming, and I'm so glad you're watching. I'm going to see you again on Monday for World of Weather at 1:15. Join me then. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe this weekend. Again, we could see more storms Sunday night, and stay with CBS 46, CBS46.com, and our streaming app for the latest on those storms. I'll see you later this afternoon on CBS 46 starting at 4 o'clock. Everyone have a great day.